I'm Stephen Monteith, and I'm here to rewrite Star Trek in the 1990s. I've done a couple of rewrite videos already on this channel, but those were about taking movies and making revisions to them, both minor and major, that gave us familiar but different versions of those movies. This video isn't about that. I'm not trying to rebuild any of the Star Trek series or movies from the 90s. Not exactly. What I'm doing is introducing a new Trek series in between The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, whose presence will affect the other series, but mostly just around the edges. Deep Space Nine and Voyager will both remain pretty much as they are. The Next Generation will be more affected, but only because plots from certain TNG episodes will become the plots of the new series, as well as some TNG characters jumping over. And some of the new series episodes will have crossovers with TNG and DS9, even a couple with Voyager. The most significant changes will be to the Star Trek TNG era movies. That's Star Trek Generations, Star Trek First Contact, Star Trek Insurrection, and Star Trek Nemesis, for reasons that'll quickly become evident. Before I get into it, I want to make a few things clear up front. First, there will be spoilers in this video for any number of Star Trek episodes and movies, not just for the ones from the 90s. Second, obviously I'm doing all of this with the benefit of hindsight, not just for how those shows and movies turned out, but for the state of television in general. The show I'm proposing is much more in line with a modern serialized show that you might find on a streaming service, like the new Trek shows, for example. It won't be nearly as episodic as classic Trek is known to be. It'll also be something of an anthology series, not focusing on the same cast in every episode. It's a show that likely never would have been made, let alone done in this manner, back in the period of television where TNG took place. The last thing I want to make clear before we get started is, since this doesn't depend on the realities of making television in the 90s, certain practical considerations like the budget, the availability of the actors and crew, not to mention their talents, are not going to be factors in this at all. I'm writing this, and as such, it can be whatever I say it will be. This is my Star Trek in the 90s fanfic, and it's called Star Trek Starfleet Command. Let's talk a little bit about the franchise as it existed in the 1990s. At the beginning of the decade, in the first few months of 1990, Star Trek The Next Generation was wrapping up its third season. Star Trek the original series, back in the 60s, had to fight tooth and nail to get 3 whole seasons. So, TNG was already doing better than the first show did. And while the first 2 seasons of TNG are seen as pretty weak now, the third season did so well that they managed to guarantee themselves a 4th season. especially with the cliffhanger ending of the third season finale, The Best of Both Worlds. But here's the thing. Nobody was really sure where the franchise was going from there. One of the reasons the cliffhanger worked so well is that people knew Patrick Stewart's contract was up for renegotiation. Even some writers and other behind-the-scenes people were pondering their future with the franchise. Deep Space Nine, of course, was still years away from being created, let alone any other Trek series or any TNG-era movies. When Riker said, "Mr. Worf, fire," literally anything could have happened. Of course, history is written, and we all know that Picard survived. He was changed back from being a Borg into being human. He captained the Enterprise for 4 more seasons, he starred in 4 movies, and now he has his own TV show named after himself. But what if it had gone differently? I'm not suggesting killing Picard. In my life, I've never imagined that happening, even when I was 9 years old watching these episodes for the first time. But what if, after rescuing Picard, Riker does stay captain of the Enterprise? You see, there was a lot of talk in the first few seasons of TNG about Riker getting his own ship. Even in Best of Both Worlds, he's offered a new command, and Picard literally asks him, "What the hell are you still doing here?" Not because Riker's a bad officer, of course, but because he's such a good officer that he should be commanding a ship by now. We're even explicitly reminded by Starfleet Admiral Hansen and the ambitious Commander Shelby that the Enterprise is a stepping stone for a lot of career-minded officers, like Riker was shown to be in his early episodes. And when the Borg pretty much decimate Starfleet over the course of this 2-parter, Shelby makes the comment that Riker will pretty much have his choice of commands after having saved the Federation pretty much single-handedly. And she's right. There's no reason, none at all, no real-world reason why, after such a drastic shakeup in Starfleet, Riker could just refuse a command at this point. And beyond that, the show itself had no reason not to give him a command. Except, of course, the fact that Star Trek just wasn't ready for a spin-off yet. But what if it were? This is where my new series comes in. You see, Riker is not the only one due for a promotion. Picard himself has been captain for longer than Riker's been a first officer, and at least one admiral lost his life fighting against the Borg. So here's what I would do. I would promote Captain Picard to Admiral, have him take over at Starfleet Command, and be the head of the first proper Star Trek spin-off, while Riker stays on as captain of the Enterprise and as the face of TNG. The crew shakeup wouldn't end there, though. Looking over the episodes of TNG from Season 4 onward, there are some characters who work better off the Enterprise, and some who work better on it. There would be a few shakeups in character dynamics, obviously, but doing this would give the characters more to do in their own particular worlds, and cut out a lot of they're just sort of standing around while Picard does his thing type stories. And as they leave TNG to be on the Starfleet Command show, some of the more minor characters would have a chance to shine just a little brighter, both on Starfleet Command and on TNG. We're going to go over these characters one by one as we go over the first half of TNG's 4th season. But first, there's one other thing I want to explain, and that's the format of this Starfleet Command show. See, there are a few different branches of Starfleet that are going to be mini focal points for the show, namely Starfleet Security, Starfleet Medical, the Starfleet Corps of Engineers, and Starfleet Academy. Each of them will have their own unique cast of characters, their own unique plot lines, their own unique aesthetics. Each one would be its own world within the world of Starfleet, and indeed within the world of Star Trek itself. Admiral Picard would be like the Nick Fury, showing up in each of these worlds and occasionally in TNG, while the different branches of Starfleet Command would be basically miniseries within the larger anthology. And like I said, when Deep Space Nine and Voyager come along, there'd be even more crossover potential. Hope you're still with me. I'm not too sure how well I'm explaining all this, but we've got a ways to go still in this video, so hopefully any confusion will be cleared up along the way. The four major characters who will be following Picard from the Next Generation to Starfleet Command are Lieutenant Worf, Chief O'Brien, and Dr. and Wesley Crusher. To give them some proper send-offs from TNG, we're going to do a little reshuffling of the episodes that make up the first half of Season 4. And now, like I said, let's go through them one by one. The fourth season premiere of TNG is Best of Both Worlds Part 2. Nothing about this episode would really change. The next episode, Family, would play out pretty much the same as it does now, except for two small details. One, while Picard is visiting his family for some much-needed catharsis, he's offered to take over a deep-sea project on Earth called Atlantis. And that's not how you tease getting Picard off the Enterprise, because even if he were tempted to stay planetside, it wouldn't be to leave Starfleet. Instead, I'd have him meet with an admiral, someone who knew Admiral Hansen like he did, and someone with whom he could mourn their shared loss. This admiral will tell Picard that he's planning to retire from Starfleet in 2 months, and he wants Picard to be his successor. That'll give Picard time to get used to the idea of leaving the Enterprise and its crew. And it'll give the fans, the viewers, enough time to get used to the idea as well. The other small change would be that Worf, who meets with his parents during the episode Family, would allow himself to be talked into accepting his own planetside assignment with Starfleet Security so he can be closer to Family after his discommendation from the Klingon Empire in Season 3. All the episodes from this point forward that deal with Worf and the Klingons can be adapted for Starfleet Command, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So, the next 2 episodes in Season 4's lineup are Brothers and Suddenly Human. They don't need to be changed at all. Nothing really important to what I'm doing happens in those. The next episode, though, Remember Me, is the episode where Dr. Crusher ends up alone on the Enterprise after everyone else disappears. Her adventure is triggered by an old friend talking about people who are disappearing from his life as he gets older. That always seemed kind of weak to me as a as a way to get her trapped in a bubble where people just start disappearing. It'd be much more powerful if this kind of alternate reality were triggered by her decision to return to Starfleet Medical. Starfleet Medical obviously needs as much help as they can get in the wake of the recent Borg attack. In fact, dealing with the aftermath of the Borg invasion could be one of her big storylines in Starfleet Medical. And Remember Me could be about her wanting to remember all her friends on the Enterprise after she's gone. It would certainly add weight to her lines in the episode about how her friends and family deserve so much more than to be brushed aside, and it would make leaving the ship again that much more poignant. The next episode is Legacy. Nothing really needs to be changed in that one either. The one after it is Reunion, where the episode where Picard becomes arbiter of succession of the Klingon Empire, and Worf is reunited with Ambassador Kalar. Like I said, I'd take this one out of rotation and put it in Starfleet Command, which hasn't started airing yet. In its place, I would put the episode Data's Day. This is an episode where, among other things, Chief O'Brien and Keiko get married. It would only be moving up a few spaces in the lineup, and the reason I'd be putting it here is because I'd want to include the information that the O'Briens are also taking advantage of this new situation to leave the Enterprise. You see, as pleasant as a normal day on the Enterprise is, when it gets dangerous, it gets ridiculously dangerous. The Borg invasion is just another reminder of that. Chief O'Brien would want his new family to be as safe as possible, so he would take a position with the Starfleet Corps of Engineers. I still intend to put them on Deep Space Nine when that show begins. I would never dare not put them there. But something that bothered me when that show began was that O'Brien had been transporter chief on the Enterprise, and that was his main focus. They didn't really build a foundation for him being the kind of wizard at engineering that he is when he shows up on Deep Space Nine. Having a few years in the Starfleet Corps of Engineers would give a chance to lay that foundation for him being such an ace. Oh, another reason to put Data's Day at this point in the lineup is because in that episode, Data makes a comment about the Hindu Festival of Lights. Putting Data's Day right after Legacy would have it be much closer to when Diwali would be observed anyway. So, there's that. The next episode that comes up is Future Imperfect. This is where Riker is given a vision of the future where he's the captain of the Enterprise and Picard is an admiral with Starfleet Command, among other things. It's initially explained that this is all just a Romulan plot, but it's eventually revealed that an alien holographic system was reading his mind to show him what he's thinking of, or something like that. And that would make a lot more sense if, with Picard and everyone else talking about leaving, Riker was already thinking about a future where he's in command of the Enterprise. The episode would need a few tweaks here and there, but only a few. Now the next episode, the 9th episode of Season 4, is Final Mission. The title is a reference to this being Wesley's final adventure with the Enterprise before he, is admitted to Starfleet Academy, which they've been teasing since the beginning of the show. But now, it can be a reference to Picard's final mission with the Enterprise as well, before taking over for his friend at Starfleet Command. The episode itself actually teased Picard leaving, but in the sense of him dying. This way, that doesn't really have to doesn't have to tease it too much, because people would already know that he's leaving the Next Generation. But it would make it a little more suspenseful, because it would be like, is he really going to Starfleet Command, or are they just going to kill him in this episode? That would actually add some suspense to that little tease that they put in there, because frankly it just didn't work as it is there, just sitting in the middle of a season like that. So that's the last episode of Season 4 before they took a break for Thanksgiving and Christmas that year. When TNG returns, the O'Briens will have left for Starfleet Corps of Engineers. Worf will have left for Starfleet Security. The Crushers will have left for the Academy and Starfleet Medical. And Picard will have left for Starfleet Command. They would each have new staffs, new co-workers, new storylines, new friends, and even new genres to explore, while the Enterprise and TNG keep exploring strange new worlds. Now, the replacements on TNG would be mostly made up of established characters, sort of. The first would be Lieutenant Commander Shelby, Riker's new first officer. She's spent the last few weeks helping to rebuild the fleet, but now she's ready to begin her tenure on the Enterprise. A lot of people actually liked Elizabeth Dennehy's portrayal of her in the Best of Both Worlds two-parter, so it wouldn't be too hard to bring her back for more. Her character had quite a bit of novel appearances in Star Trek novels, I should say, post all of this. So there's obviously plenty of people who had thought about what they'd be able to do with the character. So we have plenty of episode material for her going forward. Now, as for who would replace Dr. Crusher in sickbay, Dr. Pulaski would not be anyone's first choice. Personally, I would love to bring her back, maybe for an episode of Starfleet Medical, but I don't think a lot of people really wanted her as a regular. But at the very least, I think I would love to see how she and Crusher interact with each other. Now, the person I would pick to be the chief medical officer on the Enterprise is Dr. Solar, a Vulcan medical officer who appeared once in the second season and has been mentioned at various times in other episodes. She's played by Susie Plaxon, who also plays Admiral Kalar. Admiral Kalar, by the way, dies in the episode Reunion. But that's going to be an episode of Starfleet Command now, and it's just one more appearance, so Miss Plaxon wouldn't be pulling double duty for too long. Plus, I've always felt TNG needed a Vulcan character, an actual Vulcan. Data was meant to sort of fulfill that role in the show, but he's actually very different from Vulcans. Very unique. We need the real McCoy, so to speak. Now, as for Worf's position at tactical, this is a fairly visible position, and Obviously, it needs someone who can do action scenes. Many of Worf's key moments on the show that didn't have to do with either his Klingon or human families were simple action scenes. It's actually kind of remarkable how little he's used when the episode isn't about him. I personally don't see Tactical or Security Chief as that much bigger a role in the show than Transporter Chief is, so whoever takes over won't have much to do. Kind of like how Tasha Yar didn't have much to do in Season 1, which is a big reason why Denise Crosby decided to quit the show. Filling the real void left by Worf would mean creating an entirely new character with their own backstory and personality, not to mention subplots. Same with Chief O'Brien. And as much as I love doing that, I'm just not prepared to create whole new characters yet. So, instead, I would put Ensigns Kellogg and Jay in their places. They already exist in TNG, mostly as background characters, with hardly so much as one word spoken aloud between them across dozens of episodes, and even movies in which they both appear. But they are both in quite a few episodes, and they even have some fans of their own, believe it or not. So yeah, just bump them up the chain of command with Kellogg at Tactical and Jay as Transporter Chief. By the way, doing all this would mean that the Next Generation now has 5 senior officers who are women instead of just 2. I honestly didn't think about that until I'd already placed them in these positions, but there it is. We now have a 150% increase in the number of women serving as senior officers on the Enterprise. So, that's a bonus. Now, let's talk about which episodes from Season 4 of TNG can be adapted as episodes of Starfleet Command. As I said, this is an anthology series, so each episode or series of episodes would be designated either Command, Security, Medical, Engineering, or Academy. Now, as I said before, the episode Reunion follows the same basic plot of the original episode, Picard and Worf being the 2 major players. This is going to be the first big storyline, because it deals with Picard being the arbiter of succession for the Klingon Empire, and Worf killing Duras. It sets up a lot for what's going to come at the end of this season when we get into the redemption arc. The redemption is going to be a big crossover event. Part 1 would be a Starfleet Command episode, the season finale, and the second season premiere, both of which could cross over with the Next Generation's 4th season finale and 5th season premiere. There'd be a lot more to work with a lot of expansive work put in there, especially with Denise Crosby returning as Sela, Tasha Yar's daughter. But that's all going to be at the end of the season. After Reunion, the next one would be a Starfleet Security episode. It would be The Wounded. And this was an episode where the Cardassians claim a Federation starship is attacking their outposts. Worf would investigate the claims and possibly be responsible for taking down the Phoenix, while O'Brien can cross over because of his connection with Captain Maxwell. The next one in the lineup would be a Starfleet Academy episode. Now, this one would be an adaptation of the Drumhead. And only instead of there being sabotage or spies at work on the Enterprise, they would discover that Simon Tarses, a cadet, lied on his entrance exam, which he did in the episode Drumhead anyway. But at this point, they catch it earlier. And Judge Satie looks to start purging Starfleet Academy of undesirables, including Mr. Crusher. Because, let's face it, Wesley has done some questionable things in his time. Picard comes to his defense, and to the defense of Mr. Tarses, and he gets caught up in the judge's sweep, just like in the regular episode. And then, of course, Worf comes along with Vice Admiral Henry in tow from Starfleet Security to put an end to it all. The next episode, we could get back to Starfleet Corps of Engineers with O'Brien in a proper engineering episode. This one could include Leia Brahms. She showed up around this time in the TNG episode Galaxy's Child, and now she could make an appearance in Starfleet Corps of Engineers, definitely helping design new starships after the fleet was destroyed by the Borg. So there'd be plenty of potential storylines for them to explore. The next one, back on Earth, Picard is giving a speech to the Archaeology Council. The Crushers are guests, as is Worf and as is Vash. And Q shows up and does his Robin Hood thing, the Cupid episode, where he turns Picard into Robin Hood and Vash into Maid Marian and Mr. Worf as a merry man. There's no way I could fail to do this episode. Wherever Picard is, Q is going to follow. Another episode of this one of Starfleet Medical is would be adapting the episode The Host. Only since Riker's not around, Crusher would have to use somebody else to be the temporary host for the Odin Trill. Putting him in Picard would definitely be interesting, because obviously there's a lot of unresolved stuff going on between Picard and Crusher. But I mean, Picard is the diplomat, and, you know, it's not like he hasn't done the same thing for Sarek in the previous season of TNG, so that's how that episode would go now. Then we get into Redemption, like I said, and that closes out the first season of Starfleet Command and opens up Season 2. Now, Season 2 definitely has some potential for Starfleet Academy stories. First of all, there's the episode The Game, where there's this episode about how an alien woman has this game that gets you hooked on it and basically turns you into a mental slave. She can basically take over anybody that she wants as long as they play the game enough. And I really think this one would be better suited for Starfleet Academy, because they're more likely to to all become hooked on this kind of thing than the finest crew in the fleet. Frankly, I really think the Academy would be more susceptible to this. So, also, making it a Starfleet Command episode would mean that Starfleet Security can have an episode right after it, picking up the thread from the game as they try and track down the alien who introduced it in the first place. It can be that kind of an episode where they're trying to track down conspiracies against the Federation, and it's an opportunity for Worf to have another storyline, one that doesn't necessarily have to do with Klingons. And another Starfleet Academy episode, of course, this season is The First Duty. This is about how Wesley and his Nova Squadron buddies, they get one of their fellow pilots killed, and then they cover it up afterwards. Now, this is the episode where Picard gives his epic speech about the first duty. And well, aside from having it not take place on the Enterprise at all, because there's no need for that, because Picard and Dr. Crusher are already planetside. Nothing else about this episode would be different at all. I wouldn't change a single thing about it. Now, we'll talk about an episode of Starfleet Medical. This one is adapting the episode Ethics. See, it still affects Worf. In this episode, Worf has his back broken, and a rogue doctor is offering to perform all these risky procedures, but Crusher keeps trying to override her, to hold her back from going too far, certainly where Worf is concerned. It would make a great medical drama, and of course that kind of cutting-edge medical technology that is used in here, it's more likely to be seen at Starfleet Medical than out on a ship anyway. So I'd think that this would work better in Starfleet Command. Now, there are a couple of other crossover episodes in this season of TNG that I think, not crossover, but two-parters that could become crossovers, I should say. The first one is Unification, where Picard is looking for Ambassador Spock on Romulus, and at the same time, Riker is trying to track down all these mysterious ship disappearances that are related. So there really is no reason why that couldn't be a crossover anyway, since a lot of it takes place on the Enterprise with Riker in command, and a lot of it takes place with Picard, or, on Romulus. The only difference, I think, would be that Data wouldn't be with Picard while it's happening. But there's plenty of options for that. And the other crossover would be, again, at the end of the season finale, Time's Arrow, which is a time travel episode that takes place on Earth, so the Enterprise is coming back to Earth anyway. So that gives Picard and even Dr. Crusher a chance to team up with the Enterprise crew again if they want. Alright, and that closes out this season. The next season, Season 3 of Starfleet Command, this is where the fun starts. We're gonna have more Q episodes here. The first one is True Q. This one could easily be an episode of Starfleet Medical, because Amanda Rogers is a sort of student of Dr. Crusher's in this episode. Crusher's her mentor. And so, but when Q shows up, obviously Picard would follow. He would be drawn into it to try and mitigate things. And we would just have to think up some kind of calamity for her to solve on Earth with her powers to keep her from being able to resist using them. And then of course there's the episode Tapestry, where Picard dies, or seems to die at least, and Q gives him the opportunity to go back in time to, surprise, surprise, Starfleet Academy. And Picard can make use of the Starfleet Academy setting, and Picard can, of course, be exploring his past and how he became the man he is today. Now there's another episode in this era called Suspicions. Now in this episode, a scientist dies testing out a theory that he has, and Crusher, who has always been the detective of TNG, no matter how much Picard likes to play detective on the holodeck, Crusher is always the one who notices when something's wrong before other people do, and she's always the one who's pushing and pushing until the mystery is solved. And that's what happens in Suspicions. This would be a great Starfleet Medical episode for her. In fact, that kind of mystery solving would be a great thing for her character to do in any Starfleet Medical episode. Now, there are some two-parters in this season. This is actually, we're up to season 6 of The Next Generation, still in season 3 of Starfleet Command. There was a two-parter in season 6 of TNG called Birthright, and about half of it has to do with Commander Data trying to get in touch with his father, and the other half is about Worf trying to find out whether his father, whom he always believed had died, is still alive. Now, the two stories really don't have that much to do with each other. So, now that Data's on the Enterprise and Worf is on Earth, there's really no reason why you can't just give Data his own episode and give Worf his own episode. Especially since the episode, the Worf's part of the episode will eventually lead into the story of the rightful heir, which is another Klingon-centric episode. So I would just, so there's, like I say, there's no need to make it a crossover. I would just take Worf's part of the Birthright storyline and combine it with the story from Rightful Heir, and that would be Worf's two-parter in Season 3 of Starfleet Command. Now, another two-parter from Season 6 of TNG is called Chain of Command. Now, what happens in this episode is Picard, who's captain of the Enterprise, leaves to go investigate something, and another captain, Captain Jellicoe, takes over the Enterprise during his absence. Now, since Riker is actually the captain, and at this point has been captain for over 2 years, there's really no point in exploring Jellicoe on the Enterprise. But Picard can, but Picard is going to need some time away from Starfleet Command, obviously, for his mission and for being abducted, and while Worf is trying to lead Starfleet security in an effort to recover him, Jellicoe, if we really want to include him in this, could be Picard's temporary replacement at Starfleet Command, and Picard's staff and whatnot would have to deal with Jellicoe running the office for a while. So we could still have that kind of tension in the storyline if we want. The real thing to navigate is how TNG closed out the 6th season. They did it with Descent, which is a two-parter about the Borg. This actually becomes a problem before we get to Season 6 of The Next Generation and Season 3 of Starfleet Command. You see, in the previous season, there was an episode called I, Borg, and it introduces a Borg named Third of Five to the crew of the Enterprise. He becomes friends with Geordi and gets a new name, Hugh. Now, this is used to set up Descent, the Descent two-parter, at the end of Season 6 and the beginning of Season 7 of The Next Generation. And Picard also plays a role in these. He has a memorable encounter with Hugh on the Enterprise in the episode I, Borg, and he has plenty to do in Descent as well. Obviously, having been assimilated by the Borg, any Borg storyline would be benefited by having Picard there. But more than that, Hugh and the Borg help set up much of Star Trek Picard, the most recent series from this last winter, and a lot of the conflict and action in there. So all of that's kind of on the line too. I'm afraid really the only way to handle it would be to have Picard just sort of decide in Descent that he's going to take temporary command of the Enterprise, and because of that, he's going to make hunting down the Borg his personal mission. Now, this would mean that he still isn't there for the episode I, Borg, But there is something that can come from that. See, there was an admiral in Descent who chews out Picard for not having destroyed the Borg when he had the chance. And in this case, with him having not been there, it would mean that Riker was the one who decided to spare Hugh's life, which can also be interesting since he's the one who blew up an entire Borg cube all by himself. So granting mercy to one Borg would certainly be an interesting choice for him to make. And then, of course, in Descent, when Picard shows up to take command of going after the Borg personally, he can be the one to chew out Riker for not having destroyed the Borg when he had the chance. And that can be, and then he can meet Hugh during this episode, during this two-parter, as Hugh tries to help them rescue Geordi. That's really the best way I see it. And then their dynamic would be slightly different in Star Trek Picard, but they would still have a dynamic with each other. So hopefully that would be the best way to handle that. Another thing to consider is that while all of this is going on, Season 3 of Starfleet Command and Season 6 of TNG, all of it is taking place the same year that Deep Space Nine premieres. Now, the first episode, called Emissary, Captain Picard and the Enterprise meet with Commander Sisko as he takes command of the station. Now, Picard's the only cast member of TNG to actually show up in that episode, so he can still be there as himself. He can just have a different ship take him out to Deep Space Nine to meet with them, or he could meet with Sisko before he flies out to DS9. Either way, nothing would really change. What would change about DS9 is that suddenly we would have a lot more opportunities for crossovers. See, the presence of all these different branches of Starfleet Command means that when Deep Space Nine, or the Next Generation for that matter, has either a security issue or a medical mystery or something else, someone from Starfleet Command can show up. If a character on Starfleet Academy becomes popular, they can easily become a crew member on the station, or on the Enterprise, or on Voyager when it eventually gets made. By the way, I am one of those who thinks that Tom Paris should still be Nicholas Locarno. I mean, Ensign Sito got the opportunity to redeem herself on the Enterprise. Nicholas Locarno should have gotten the opportunity to redeem himself as well. He did take the fall for the others, after all. But anyway, obviously both Chief O'Brien and Worf make their debuts on Deep Space Nine when they're supposed to, and they still keep in contact with their former associates at the Starfleet Corps of Engineers and Starfleet Security whenever there's a problem. And when The Next Generation ends, Barclay can join the Starfleet Corps of Engineers, which leads into his established appearances near the end of Star Trek Voyager. And Section 31, which makes its first chronological appearance, at least, late in Deep Space Nine, could first appear in Starfleet Security. Like I said, the crossover potential for having a show like Starfleet Command is endless. And not much else has to even change. Except when we get to the movies. This is where things start to get destructive. So far, we've been constructive and even adaptive. Just building more episodes, more characters, shuffling stuff around from one series to another. But when it comes to the TNG era movies, there's a lot that just doesn't work anymore. And I'm not talking about whether or not the movies themselves work. I mean, as things stand, Picard is the captain of the Enterprise for 7 straight seasons and for 4 movies, and has mostly the same crew for all of it. But if we move him to Starfleet Command, along with Worf and the others, and you make Riker the captain for the last 4 seasons, it would definitely shake up the plots of each of the TNG era films. Well, let's face it, I don't think a lot of people would mourn if Insurrection or Nemesis were removed from the timeline, as it were. The one I think everyone would try to save is First Contact. That's actually not going to be hard to do. We just have to change the beginning of it a bit. You see, as the Borg ship is approaching Earth, just have Picard take command of the fleet, as an admiral in Starfleet Command certainly has the option to do. Riker can be captain of the Enterprise E, a new ship that's built during the Dominion War, and Picard can designate it as his flagship to coordinate the battle. They save Worf and the crew of the Defiant, just like they do in the movie, and literally everything else from that point on happens just as it did already. Now, we would need an explanation for why Riker is captain of the Enterprise E instead of the Enterprise D, since the plot of the movie Generations likely wouldn't work so well in this continuity. But now that we're on the subject, another thing that wouldn't work so well is the original Next Generation finale, All Good Things. Personally, I think it's the perfect finale. I can't think of a better TV finale, honestly. But it just doesn't work unless Picard has been in command of the Enterprise D the whole time. So, how to fix that, and how to fix the plot hole at the beginning of First Contact. Simple. My idea for a new finale of The Next Generation is to adapt the B-plot of the movie Generations. You know, where the Duras sisters are developing a weapon to help them reconquer the Klingon Empire. I actually like the movie Generations, but there are so many things about it that just don't work unless you're already a fan of The Next Generation, like the Duras sisters. It's a movie that really does feel, in retrospect, like a really long, really well funded episode of The Next Generation. And if you remove all the parts about the Nexus and Kirk and Picard's family dying, and even Picard himself, I think we've got a great alternate finale to The Next Generation. One that leaves Riker in command, gives Data emotions, and crashes the Enterprise D, thereby giving Riker a reason to need a new ship in First Contact. Seriously, I like this idea. I really do. And with First Contact being released in what may be Starfleet Command's 7th and last season, it could start a string of spin-off movies about Starfleet Command itself. We could avoid the Kelvin movies entirely. Of course, this could also affect the creation of at least Star Trek Picard, a show that I've recommended on my podcast and on this channel at least twice now. And prequel series like Enterprise and Discovery, a show that has definitely grown on me, might also be affected. But that's all in the future, so to speak. This video is just about Star Trek in the 90s. And I'm pretty pleased, and I have to say even surprised about how most of the ideas that I've presented have turned out. I honestly didn't know where some of them were going when I started. But that's the life of a writer. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope, if you're a Trekkie, that you felt my ideas were interesting and that you didn't object too strenuously. I tried to leave some of the fan favorites in place. Like I said, I never would have killed off Picard. I never would have interfered with O'Brien's time on Deep Space Nine, or Worf's time there for that matter. But I felt that they all could have had more interesting things to do while they were waiting. And I felt that Riker definitely deserved to be a captain for at least half the time on that show. And short of killing Picard, the only way to give Riker a captain seat and to keep him around was to either give him his own spinoff or to give him the Enterprise and force Picard to take a promotion. So, sorry Picard, you're just going to have to be Admiral for now. Like I said, thank you all for watching. Be sure to rate and comment and let me know your ideas for how you would change Star Trek. And be sure to watch my other videos and listen to my podcast. It's been a long Star Trek month, and I've had a lot of things to say about the franchise. So I'd like to know what you have to say about what I've had to say, and what you have to say about what you have to say, and what I have to say about what you have to say. I'm starting to talk like Data now. I'll just wrap this up then. Thank you for listening. Live long and prosper.